welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is a horrifying hunting trip from hell. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments, and please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And of course, don't forget to hashtag Team Fear. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled HellHound, Part 1. Let's get straight into that. Sitting up in the stand I had built the previous year, smoking a cigarette and watching for deer, I was unaware that I was about to be mauled nearly to death. All I was concerned with was the rustling noise I had just heard from the brush, hoping it to be the first deer of the season. I readied my bow as the biggest deer I had ever seen slowly walked into my line of sight from a clump of trees. The deer itself looked large despite the distance, and from my stand I could still tell that it was a buck as big as day and with 12 beautiful points. I drew my bow, my vision swimming from the whiskey I had slammed down. I cursed myself for the bottle I had put into my system, but I could not let this opportunity pass. The buck's coat was glossy and beautiful in the full moonlight. My vision may have been traitorous, but my body remained steady. I let loose my arrow and my aim remained true. Even from my distance, I could see the splash of crimson blood shining in the light of the moon, as it flew from between the buck's eyes and stained the shining snow. My arrow lodged deep into the buck's skull, and he crumpled to the ground with a groan that echoed throughout the woods. I climbed from the stand quickly, rushing to my kill. The beautiful beast was dead as soon as I hit it, and it was still bleeding. I carefully removed the arrow from its skull, admiring my work. The deer's coat was almost golden, and its tail was as white as snow. If I had been paying more attention, I would have heard the long, mournful howls echoing throughout the woods, growing louder. I cleaned my arrow off onto the leg of my jeans, never one to waste. The deer was nearly as large as my car, and moving it would be no mean feat. I rushed back to my stand to get my travois I had built earlier that evening, and dragged it back to the deer. When I arrived there, however, I found 4 bears sniffing at my kill. I ran towards them, shouting and making myself as large as possible, attempting to scare them off. And that's when one of them whipped around, and I stumbled backwards, falling from my feet. It's then I realized that they were not, in fact, bears. I was being stared down by a wolf the size of an adult male grizzly bear. I made eye contact with one, and it had eyes of pure red that burned like the flames of hell. It snarled, drool and foam dripping from its maw. A long, forked tongue hung out between its fangs of pure white. Its shaggy coat was black as charred wood, and smoke poured from its nose with each exhale. I heard howls from all around me, and I knew that there was no escape. I would have to fight if I wanted to survive. The whiskey drained out of my system very quickly. I unsheathed my tactical knife and grabbed my switchblade just in case. The first wolf charged, and I slashed at it across the face, drawing blood that steamed in the cool night air. Its blood was shiny and black like nothing I had ever seen before. It lunged at me, and I plunged my knife into its neck, jumping back so as not to be taken down. I dropped into a crouch, and as I was working on pulling my tactical knife out, the next 2 charged. I threw my switchblade into the eye of one, and dropping it to the ground with a low howl of pain. I rolled with a tactical knife in hand, out of the way of the other, and 3 more wolves were circling me at this point, and I could hear more running through the underbrush. I lunged on the one that had just missed me and slit its neck. 4 more had arrived, and yet still more were coming. I knew I could not get out of this, but I was determined to take out as many as I could. I threw my switchblade into the throat of the largest beast, and it crumpled with a groan as the red of its eyes drained to black. I heard one behind me and stabbed backwards into its skull, my knife becoming stuck. And with my switchblade gone and my knife stuck, I had to resort to fighting with arrows. One lunged atop of me and my arrow breaking as I attempted to stab it. I grabbed it by the neck, fighting to keep it from biting into me, and as we struggled, the others drew closer. The beast's jaws snapped and gnashed in my face. I reached out, fumbling, and grabbed a rock. It wasn't much, but it did the job. I swung and smashed it into the side of the beast's head. Blood splashed onto my face, and the creature fell from me. I began to stumble onto my feet, but two more lunged on top of me, and I felt my body slam back into the ground. My arms and legs were pinned. One stood above me, growling as I felt my legs being shredded by the beasts. I heard tearing of meat and snapping of tendons as they began to devour me alive. I did not bleed. Their saliva burned my wounds, cauterizing them. One wolf leaned into my face, growling at me as if to taunt me. And just as it was about to bite into my neck, I heard an ear-piercing howl. It was low, gravelly, and it shook the earth around me. It brought terror to my mind and tears to my eyes. As the howl continued on, it became higher and seemed to multiply. It sounded as if millions of screams were contained in that howl, and I realized that my own was one. The wolves slowly backed away from my mangled body. I couldn't feel my legs below my knees. My arms were gone entirely, and I could see large holes in my stomach and chest. It's a miracle I was still alive. A wolf approached me. The beast was the size of a car, with hundreds of teeth in its bared maw. I knew immediately it was the source of the howl. As it loomed over me, it growled, a hellish rumble. Saliva dripped into my left eye, leaving me blinded. I spat into its face. Wolves can't look shocked, but I'll be damned if this wolf didn't look shocked. I saw a flash, and I felt blood dripping from my face. 4 deep slashes ran across my face from the wolf scratching me. The beast went for my throat, and everything went dark. I awoke with a start, surprised and confused. If it weren't for my blindness in my left eye, I would have thought that I dreamt it. I sat up and screamed. My arms were completely black, as if charred. My legs below the knees were in the same state. My clothes were shredded, and I could see burns all over my body as well. I felt no pain from them, however, and I could feel even better than before. My legs felt stronger, as did my arms. I ran my hand along my leg, finding the skin to feel cracked, as burnt wood feels. But the charred skin did not come off. I stood up, finding my legs feeling strange beneath me. I looked around, and the corpses of wolves were gone, leaving only black bones. My knife remained, glowing red as if it had just come from a forge, and yet, as I pulled it from the black skull, I found that it was still as hard as ever. I could feel the heat coming off of it, and yet it was so cool to my touch. I stabbed it into a tree as a test, and it scorched the wood around it. I sheathed it, accepting it as another odd thing about the night to figure out. The same effect had been applied to my switchblade. I used my blade to attempt to cut into the blackened skin of my leg, to no avail. I couldn't even create dimples of pressure. Perhaps, strangest of all, my deer was still there. It was now cold and stiff, but was untouched. I decided not to test my luck and left it for the worms. I returned to my cabin and packed up all that I had brought. Before leaving, I took a long cold shower, yet when the water hit my skin, it turned to steam. I took a long look in a mirror afterwards. I had one blue eye, as always, but now the other was shut. I opened it, knowing what I would find. I had an eye as red as blood. I could see from it, and yet what I felt from what I saw was different. I hated the stranger in the mirror and felt a snarl rise in my throat. I quickly shut the eye again and put a bandage over it. My skin alternated between charred black and light olive. I felt taller, despite already coming in at an impressive 6'8". I greased back my black hair as always, no excuse not to look good. I threw out my tattered clothes, replacing them with black jeans, a white shirt, and my trusty old leather jacket. As I got into my 57 Bel Air, I could have sworn I heard a howl in the distance. The drive home was long, but not long enough. I was not ready to face the world. Nobody would believe what had happened to me, even with my skin as proof. I expected the question before it was even asked. As I pulled into the driveway of my home, I knew what would be said as soon as my mother saw me. I opened the door slowly, with much reluctance. "Sean, you're home! We weren't expecting you for another My mother trailed off. "What happened to you, Sean?" she said with much sorrow and more than enough fear. In the winter of 1958, I was only 22, a kid still in college, trying to become a psychologist, a punk with a few nasty habits and more than enough trauma to need a psychologist himself. Now, in 2020, I am 84. Not that you would believe me. And besides a few more scars, I look exactly the same as I did that fateful day in 58. Well, not entirely. I've got on a few new haircuts and currently settled on a slicked back quiff. I've moved enough to keep my identity secret. I don't need some government stiff poking his nose into my business. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I just want to make it by. I wouldn't even be writing this if it weren't for two things. The first is a girl, as it always is. Delilah, the receptionist at the clinic I currently work at. Aside from the occasional fling, I stay away from romance. But this girl is different. She is young and smart, and when she smiles, her nose crinkles in a way that always makes me smile too. And for once, I find myself wanting to show someone my scars, and because I feel as if she would love me for them, not in spite. The other reason I write this is that last night I had a dream. Normally, my sleep is short and dreamless. Last night, however, I did dream. I dreamt of my neighbour. He had a child locked in his basement and was torturing him. He would beat and rape him over and over, day in and day out until he died, and then he would feed the meat to his dogs and bury the bones. I knew it was not the first and would not be the last. I would have ignored the dream if I hadn't seen my neighbour ushering a young boy into his house in the dark of night. It was the boy in my dream, a child of no more than 8, with long blonde hair and brown eyes. He had pale skin and was of heavier set. I felt my blood boil and a snarl rise in my throat. I have fought off the transformations in the past. Only once before did I turn, the very first time. And perhaps I will tell that story here someday. Until then, it's getting late. The moon is rising, and I know there will be hunting tonight. My red eye opens, and I feel the wolf coming. Perhaps I will let him out after all. Who better to dole out justice than the HellHound? And this is Sean, bidding you a good night and happy hunting. Wow. Awesome stuff. Thank you ever so much to the authors. As ever, guys and girls, you know the drill. Please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments. Also, please do like and share. It really does make a difference and really helps build the channel and our community further. And of course, don't forget to hashtag Team Fear. I hope you're all well and happy, but above all, guys, remember, be safe, not sorry.